Hello everyone, my name is Garrett, and today is a great day to learn something new.
So let's do that together. My name is Gabe, and welcome to
Studio Classroom. Hi friends, we're continuing our lesson called the $20 Challenge. This is a special challenge from a teacher in Pennsylvania for her students. And a lot like we talked about yesterday, there are a lot of something challenges you can find online. Many of these are raising money for a special purpose, to do something good.
That's right. People are raising funds maybe to help a certain cause, right? Something that stuck out to me from yesterday's lesson is that this teacher, Christina, she was in the middle of teaching her class about this book, Fahrenheit 451, which kind of deals with the idea of people being so glued to their screens and so into themselves that they lacked empathy for other people. And she really wanted to teach her classroom empathy. One way to do that is by giving to other people. So that's kind of where this idea, this $20 challenge came from.
Sometimes it really does take someone else challenging you to start thinking about others and their issues. Well, friends, we'll continue talking about this challenge today. Let's get into our first reading.
The $20 Challenge. The project became known as the $20 Challenge. The students loved the idea. They used the money to buy groceries for a struggling family, aid animal shelters, and brighten the day of veterans. One student spent her $20 on donuts. Then she stood on a street corner with her uncle and handed them out to strangers.
All right, friends, you know a bit about the origins of the $20 Challenge. You know about what the challenge is for these students, but what did they do with that money?
Well, we read here in our lesson, the project became known as the $20 Challenge. So maybe at the beginning, Christina didn't have this name in mind. She didn't think, oh, this is the $20 Challenge. But because each student had $20, and it was a challenge that their teacher gave them, they started calling it the $20 Challenge.
Right. The students loved the idea. They liked the idea of doing an act of kindness. And they used the money for a few different things.
That's right. We see a couple of different examples here. We don't see everything that they did. They used the money to buy groceries for a struggling family. What is a struggling person, Garrett, or a struggling family?
Well, it's someone who's going through a hard time. Often here, when we talk about a struggling family, it's probably an issue of money.
That's right, finances. Maybe they don't have enough money to make ends meet. In other words, they just don't have enough money to buy the things that they need, the basics. So they also aided animal shelters, and they brightened the day of veterans. Let's take a look at a couple of these things here. Of course, to aid means to help, but here, shelter is a place that protects people or animals who need help.
Exactly. For people, you might say storm victims stayed in emergency shelters during the hurricane.
Now, what can you do to brighten someone's day? This is always a good thing to think about and to ask yourself. It's something I should ask myself more often. How can I brighten someone else's day? To brighten someone's day means to make someone feel happier.
There are so many ways to do this. Even just simple, kind words can help brighten someone's day.
That's right. Or, smiling at someone as you walk by, whether it's someone you know or a stranger. Well, let's take a look at another thing here, and that is a veteran. A veteran is someone who has served in the military.
Exactly. A school might invite veterans to speak on Memorial Day. Well, yes, veterans are people who served in the military, but they're not in the military anymore, and they might need a lot of help.
It's true. In fact, a lot of them do need a lot of help in different ways. Sometimes people even lose some limbs when they're off at war somewhere. They come back and it's very hard to find jobs depending on the situation. So it is a great idea to honor the veterans who have served in the military. And so this is something that these students are doing.
Well, one other student did something fun. They bought $20 of donuts.
All right.
Oh, yes. And then she stood on a street corner with her uncle and handed them out to strangers. Can I have one?
That is such a great idea. This sounds like the tastiest of these challenges, right? Well, what does it mean to hand out something? This is to give something to people, usually one by one.
Exactly. You might hand out cookies to everyone in your class. Well, these are some of the examples of what the students did for the $20 challenge.
Yeah, so if you had $20 and you were going to do the $20 challenge, be creative. You can do a lot of different kinds of things. Some of them can be actually quite enjoyable. In fact, if you are doing something that shows empathy to somebody else, it should be enjoyable. Well, we do have more to learn, so let's get into the next reading for the day.
The $20 challenge. The experience made such a deep impression on her that she continues the practice every year. After the first semester, the community began to donate to the challenge, which allowed Ulmer to continue it year after year.
All right, so these students did this $20 challenge. They did acts of kindness for people around them. And what were the results?
All right, well, this experience made such a deep impression on her that she continues the practice every year. Let's talk about that word impression. This is the opinion or feeling you get about someone or something or from an experience.
All right. You might have a good impression of a group of people after they do something kind for you.
So I don't think that she was the only one who was impressed by this and what happened, right? I think it made an impression on everybody involved. It sounds like the entire community was impacted by this as well. So she continues the practice every year, continues. This is not something that happened in the past. This is not a story that only happened in the past. This is ongoing even today. When we talk about the practice, what do we mean?
Well, we're not talking about practicing like you would to get ready for a baseball game. The practice is the regular activity of doing something. Just something that you do regularly, not necessarily to get better at it.
He began the practice of writing a letter once a week. Sometimes we begin doing things maybe to develop a certain habit, just because we want to be in the habit of doing something, and so we have the practice of doing it. And I think that's the idea with Christina and her class.
Right. They wanted to keep this up, keep spreading more and more kindness in the community. And after the first semester, so remember, many school years are broken up into 2 semesters or halves, the community began to donate to the challenge.
All right, so remember what happened the first time she did this. She had $100 from her sister, Katie, and she used some of her own money to make sure that everybody in her class had $20. Well, could she do that with every class she had? Perhaps. Maybe, yeah, but the community saw what was going on and they wanted to contribute as well.
Right, possibly they even got to spread it to other classrooms too. Yes, to donate is to give something to help others. We're usually using this for money or other physical goods like food.
That's right, or clothes. They donated clothes to the homeless shelter, for example. So the community began to donate to the challenge, or we might even say to the cause, which is a good cause here, which allowed Ulmer to continue it year after year. Year after year means every year for a long time.
Right. For example, she wins awards year after year for her writing. That is a great phrase that you can use in your sentences.
So, how many students have done this challenge so far? That is something we're going to find out in our next section. But right now, let's go to today's Info Cloud.
The $20 challenge. As of last fall, Ulmer's students have done over 350 acts of kindness in her sister's memory. While the challenge has helped many people, Ulmer has seen how the experience has changed her students. They shared thoughts such as, "We learned that small acts of kindness like this can make someone's day," and "It really takes so little to make someone's day. Being kind is basically free." Ulmer continues to teach her students a valuable lesson. Kindness doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be shared.
All right, remember we're asking that question, how many students have been a part of this $20 challenge? And who is it helping? Just the people getting something out of it? Or is it the students too?
I think you know the answer, friends, but let's get into this section here. As of last fall, Ulmer's students have done over 350 acts of kindness in her sister's memory. Let's take a look at that phrase at the very beginning, as of. This could mean starting from a certain time. It could also be referring to at a certain time considering the past. For example, as of last fall in our lesson, the students had done a certain number of things. Or in the future, as of next week, the new rules will begin.
Right, so at that point in time, this was the statistic or the number, and that might be different now or today. So as of last fall, there were 350 acts of kindness. That phrase is a lot like what we've been talking all about.
That's right. What is an act of kindness? This is a nice or helpful thing that you do for someone else.
Exactly. For example, the students did small acts of kindness each day. We can all find little ways to do an act of kindness in our own lives.
Now, I think it is important to make a distinction between being nice and being kind. I think it's good to be nice to everybody. You want to smile and be cordial with other people, be friendly, right? Being kind, I think, is more of a character trait that you have for a long time. It's very important to be a kind person. But of course, you can do individual acts of kindness. They did this in Christina's sister's memory. Remember yesterday we talked about doing it in her honor, right? So this is to honor or remember her sister after she passed away.
Exactly. In yesterday's article, we talked about how Christina's sister was someone who loved to do acts of kindness for others. And so by continuing to do that same thing, they really are honoring or remembering her sister.
Okay, so while the challenge has helped many people, as you can imagine, Ulmer has seen how the experience has changed her students. So kind of in response to what you were mentioning earlier, Garrett, it did not just help other people, you know, the donuts that people enjoy, that's great, but it also helped the students as well.
Sure, I'm sure it's something they could keep up on their own even after that year. Well, they shared thoughts such as, "We learned that small acts of kindness like this can make someone's day."
Hey, make someone's day. That's very similar to that phrase we learned earlier, to brighten someone's day. In fact, they could mean the same thing. What can you do to make someone's day today? You know, if you give someone even just a simple cup of coffee or even water, that's an act of kindness that could make their day.
Right, it could totally change their emotions in a hard day. Well, they also said it really takes so little to make someone's day. Being kind is basically free.
That's right. What does it mean to take so little or take so much? That word take here basically means require. There's not a lot that is involved. You don't need a whole lot to make someone's day.
It's funny that they use the word free here, since the whole challenge is about an amount of money. It wasn't free, it was $20, but that's not that much money.
$20 is not that much money, but the reality is, Garrett, I think that even if we didn't use money, we could still use our creativity and imagination to think of other ways to make someone's day. For example, like writing a nice note for somebody.
I totally agree. Well, we're almost done with our lesson here. Ulmer continues to teach her students a valuable lesson. Kindness doesn't have to be huge, it just has to be shared.
Well, let's take a look at this lesson-related phrase, a valuable lesson. This is an important and useful thing that you learned from an experience.
Exactly. For example, losing taught him a valuable lesson about teamwork that he carried on to the next football game. Well, we had so many phrases with that word lesson throughout this article. Yes, sometimes the things we do or experience teach us even more than we do in a textbook.
That's true. Speaking of which, it has been a great lesson, and right now it is time for today's fun fact. All right, as we finish today's lesson, I have a question for you. Have you ever done something in someone's memory before or in honor of someone?
Well, the first thought that came to mind was doing this for someone that hadn't actually passed away.
Okay, great.
A dear friend of mine had a really significant accident. He almost died. And a bunch of friends got together to sell wristbands in his honor in order to help kids in Africa to build a school.
Wow. And Garrett brings up a great point. It doesn't have to be something in someone's memory, someone who has passed away. It could just be honoring somebody else who is alive, someone who is very significant and has done something that is impactful. I ran a race a while ago in my dad's honor because he was going through cancer at the time. And I think there's just a lot of ways that we can do things in honor of other people. And it really can make a difference. Well, friends, that is all the time that we have for today. My name is Gabe.
And my name is Garrett. We'll see you again next time right here on Studio Classroom.